Life Audio.
I had made my way from 3 different cities and circled back close to my brother-in-law's house in a total span of roughly 20 to 22 miles. So walking, occasionally running, and I wind up at this bridge overlooking a very busy highway here in Texas. And I know exactly what I had planned to do. I'm staring at the oncoming traffic, trying to find the right 18-wheeler, deciding is it going to be Peterbilt or Mack across my forehead.
Hello, and welcome to the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I am your host, John Seidel. This is your home for real stories, radical vulnerability, and remarkable comebacks. In the end, this podcast is a place for the desperate, the downtrodden, the destitute, and especially the drunk. But it's also a place of hope and healing. I know that firsthand because I'm the Christian who became an alcoholic, not the other way around. Today, I've found sobriety after decades of struggling. But more importantly than finding sobriety, I found Jesus. My prayer is that as I interview people just like you and just like me, along with professionals in the fields of trauma, faith, and addiction recovery, you will find the peace that is available to you through Christ on the other side of whatever you're going through and whatever addiction that might be. Because, let's face it, we're all addicted to something. So, welcome. Let's get radically vulnerable as we explore what it looks like to be on this journey of messy sanctification. You know, some of us are runners. And when I say that, I do not mean physically. Although maybe you're listening to this and you're a runner. I try to run as much as possible. But I think a lot of us are runners in the spiritual sense. In the emotional sense, I say that my addiction wasn't to alcohol. My addiction really was to escapism, just trying to run away from feeling the things I didn't want to feel. Today's guest is also a runner. He ran from God. He ran from accountability. He ran from a lot of treatment centers. And he ran from me. And so it's kind of a funny story, but I had heard about this guy because our kids, our boys went to school together, same elementary school, and his wife started sharing on Facebook that he was in treatment. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, I would love to connect with him. And so she's like, that'd be great. And she gave me his number and he never got back to me. And, you know, he'll talk about this a little bit, but, you know, I think he was embarrassed. I think he wanted to keep his story tight to the vest. And what I love about today's guest is that I have seen him personally go through an evolution in that he has become someone who realizes the power of sharing your story, even though it's embarrassing, even though there are aspects that could produce shame. But he really lives out Revelation 12, that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so today's guest is Travis Blakeley. Travis has become a dear and close friend. He's actually one of the founding board members to the nonprofit that I started and run called Veritas Recovery. And Travis has just been co-laboring alongside of me in a special way in getting that off the ground, has been responsible for just some incredible stuff that we've been able to do. And so Travis, though, is someone who's kind of your typical suburban dad. We live in a suburb of North Dallas, and Travis had it all. Grew up in a very affluent neighborhood in downtown Dallas, went to a very prestigious school, worked in professional basketball, worked in professional broadcasting. And he'll talk about how he was drunk on air. He'll talk about how bad it got, how he got fired from his job, and what that led to. And it is a reminder that disordered loves, disordered affections don't care who you are. We all have them. And so finally, after going through plenty of attempts at different treatment facilities, he wound up at a gospel-centered one. And he's going to talk about that experience and what the Lord did in his life. He is a different person. It's kind of hard for me. Like, I hear the stories, I hear his wife, I talk to his wife. Our families are friends, and it's interesting because the Travis that they know from the past, it's just so hard for me to imagine that Travis. Just like I'm sure, and I've said this on the podcast before, one of my greatest fears is that you only know this version of me. You only hear this version of me, and I don't want you. I want you to know that there is a different version of me. There was a different version of me. That person is still someone I'm warring against, and that person is selfish, and that person just wants to escape, and that person is willing to sink into oblivion to not have to be present. Or I should say, in some ways, to be present, to not have to be thinking about the things I don't want to think about. And so it's interesting because I don't know that Travis, just like you don't know that me. But Travis and me do our best to introduce you to that person, because in order for you to understand what God is capable of doing, it's imperative that you understand where we were. And so Travis is going to take us on that journey. And I'm just so thankful for his partnership, his friendship. He has become just a dear friend and someone who I trust implicitly. And so I'm excited to introduce him to you today. Before we get there, though, I talked about Veritas Recovery. That is the nonprofit that we work for. You can go to veritasrecovery.org. We are creating and have created and are still working to create more frontline resources for those of you who do not have access to gospel-centered recovery or are too ashamed to pursue it because showing up to your gospel-centered recovery ministry means outing or exposing yourself, and we get that. And so we want to offer you help and hope now, with the hopes of pointing you to deeper discipleship in the local church context. So go to veritasrecovery.org and you can get the free resources if you feel called to help support what we're doing, and making those resources available to the most amount of people free of charge. I'd be honored if you considered a donation. So with that said, let me introduce you to my good friend, Travis Blakeley. Travis, thank you so much for joining the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. This has been a long time coming. We were talking about that a little bit before we came on air. But the story, if you will, of how we met is a great one. And in a sense, the fact that you are here is a testament to God, because you ran away from me, brother. You ran like a marathon sprinter. That doesn't even make sense.
Well, I do have a background in track and field, John. So, I leaned on some former talents that I probably put too much of my own identity in.
Yeah.
To think back to that Tuesday night, right around when the birth of my fourth child was taking place, just a touch before she arrived, and for God to step in and put us together physically in the same room after not returning several of your texts and being flighty, because I was fearful of breaking certain walls with my testimony, a testimony that is truly a gift of God, one that others do need to share or hear rather. But my comfortability and my vulnerability were limited by my fear.
Mm-hmm. And so I talked a little bit about that in the intro, that, we were, I was originally writing the book, and then it was going to have stories of other people. I kind of heard about you through the grapevine. I started trying to get a hold of you. You ran. We ended up meeting randomly with, not planning on meeting you. But then from there, we met, and you told me your story. in the middle of a Black Rifle coffee shop. And it was like, it was almost like looking in a mirror in several aspects. And so I want you to tell us that story, to tell us the story of Travis Blakeley. How did you end up in a 9 months, right?
9 months. Yeah.
9-month
Yeah.
inpatient treatment facility for alcoholism after being, like so many of us, I think, that listen to this, someone who knew Jesus, had grown up in that environment,
Right.
and yet still became an alcoholic. So tell us the story of Travis Blakeley.
Well, John, I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for your audience to be able to share this story, right? And for those who have read your book, Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, it's remarkable how similar my walk was to yours. And conversely, I think that's what built such a strong bond between us. But, it wasn't as though my alcoholism started when I was in my 30s or in my 20s even, right? My dependence on something other than Christ in my life started at a much earlier age, and it stemmed from both little t and big T trauma around the age of 11 and 12. Both the separation and ultimate divorce of my parents from the little t trauma perspective, as well as some abuse that took place at the hands of a familiar but yet an outsider when I was younger, led me to look elsewhere and to take a different approach as to what love was and how I could gain it. And it became very transactional and performance-based. And it wasn't shortly thereafter, both in my parents' divorce in that case and also in the case of being abused, that I started smoking pot. And, around 12 years old, I encountered it in an older cousin's bathroom. And he offered it after I kind of found it, looking for a roll of toilet paper under the sink. And lo and behold, I liked it. It was comforting. It was medicating to an extent, right? And I think that's one of the things that I continued to chase, was that first time of feeling pain relief at a mental level that bled into kind of a spiritual level that allowed a certain comfort to be had and that pain to negate, albeit briefly. And it left me chasing time after time after time. And that led me to a significant amount of drinking right around the start of high school, like between that transition from middle school to high school, excessive binge drinking throughout high school. The wheels came off in college, but throughout that process, I was able to skirt any level of true consequence because I was performing at a very high level, academically, athletically. And then, college came about. I was a basketball player, and I got in trouble my freshman year. And rather than face the consequences that were put in front of me and becoming a part of like a probation level status student, I decided to simply pack up and come home and transfer. And again, just avoiding responsibility, not recognizing or submitting to the fact that I had this problem and this misaligned love and this misunderstanding of what love was. Mm-hmm. I just kept chasing. And I chased by drinking. I chased by performing. I chased by getting high. And John, I can tell you, even in success, I sought to self-medicate. In failure, I sought to self-medicate. In celebration, right? In average mundane days, I sought that. And in seeking that primarily over any true relationship, I became enamored and in love with the feeling of being drunk or the feeling of being high. And it took over. And things only perpetuated. Again, masquerading under the guise of success, entering into pro sports, working in basketball for 9 seasons and doing well at a very early age, just stymied any approach to recovery or moderation. And ultimately that came crashing down because I was getting drunk on television. I was getting drunk going to games that I was either coaching or was supposed to be evaluating in my role as a front office executive. And then I was doing television insights for like pregame and halftime and postgame, intoxicated. And I was found out. And I'd put so much of an identity in that idea, that as being who I was this basketball guy. Then when that was stripped of me, the drinking only increased. Right. And then as this is all unfolding, I'm married, I'm having a child, our first of 4. And the stresses that come with that, as I know you're aware of being a father yourself, just continued to layer on top. And rather than seek help, rather to admit to a problem, I tried my best to simply hide. And I never came forward about any level of the psychological and the mental issues I was facing, along with the trauma that I certainly feel were catalysts towards that, until it reached a really, really difficult time, what people would call a rock bottom moment. And it was approaching my daughter's 10th birthday when I was arrested for drinking in a grocery store, not paying for that. I would walk by the single serve aisle before they were available for sale and grab them and drink them in the aisles and throw them behind other groceries that were on the shelves to hide the evidence. And I was caught on camera and caught by the manager of the store, and they called the police. And to say it affected my daughter and my wife would be an understatement. The level at which I still don't know, I can't fathom, but I thank the Lord for the healing that has taken place since that point. But that was in January, nearly 4 years ago. And it led to a meeting with my pastors in our home where I finally shared some of the things that I'd been carrying for 38 years. Well, 38 years is how old I was at the time, but for 27 years. And I shared the traumatic experiences that took place. And it was healing and cathartic in the moment, but there wasn't any follow-up that I took action on. I didn't seek to do anything after the fact. So I think by the standard alcoholic approach, I started to white knuckle things.
Yeah.
Right. Because I got it out into the world, but I got it out without a plan. And I got it out without an expectation of myself to do something about it. So I maintained sobriety for approximately 6 weeks until a marathon here in the DFW area that I was running with some friends from our church run club. And an injury crops up about 12, 13 miles into the race, and my knee swells up like the size of a balloon. And I'm not used to significant injury, and I keep trying to power through it. And a guy who's running with me, I think had a sense of what my mind was doing at the time, because I kept encouraging him to just leave me behind. And those who don't know run culture, around about the 10-mile mark, you start to see these tables set up every half mile to a mile where people offer you Jello shots, a beer, a shot of tequila, a margarita. And it's very pervasive in the culture of running. And he knew my struggles with alcohol and my fight to stop. And despite his urging to stay with me, I pushed him along after about 6 attempts at him saying, no, he's gonna hang with me. And I took another drink. And that led me down a cycle for about 4 months, until a really ugly battle between my wife and I verbally pushed me kind of over the breaking point. And that was a 4-month period of me on crutches, leaving my home to crutch to the gas station at 6:45 in the morning to be able to buy alcohol here in Texas at 7 a.m. and hide a bottle in the pond behind our house.
Yeah.
Pour the vodka into the White Claw, and that's how I'd start my day. And in order to do it, I would literally crutch over a mile to the gas station. And just thinking back, it's just so desperate. And it's so unfortunate that my wife and my children had a father and a husband who was so reliant on that as an escape and as a medication, to the point where May 27th comes and I'm thrown out of my house. And
why? What was kind of the final straw for your wife there?
well, definitely a significant amount of financial impropriety, because I had to hide the drinking. So I was, selling things and pocketing the cash, using that to purchase alcohol, using that to purchase weed. A lot of lying and manipulation about where I'd been, what I'd been doing. Driving drunk again. I'd had a DWI already in my life. I drove with the kids, my two boys in the back seat. And I did so on the way to church while my wife was out of town, while serving at church, no less.
So you got drunk on a Sunday on a Sunday morning, I'm assuming.
So it started in the morning. Service was that afternoon. I like to think I managed it throughout the day, but I can't assure anyone that I did. Load the boys in the car, drive to church, go inside. Immediately, there were people that thought I was off, to the point where they contacted my wife. Not so much out of concern for me, but out of concern for the fact that my boys were there.
Yeah.
And it was one of those tipping points that she knew, the hammer had to come down. And in her words, she couldn't stand by and let herself and the kids watch me kill myself. Because that's what I was doing. And I couldn't continue to put them in danger. So it was, you're out of the house. My brother-in-law took me in for the night. He lived in a city about 15 miles away. And I woke up the next morning, no real plan of action except to get drunk, because that was my coping mechanism. That's how I solve problems.
Yep.
And John, I just started wandering around, and I had no credit card. I had no money. I had no resources. I just took off and started walking, and made my way a few miles into this gas station, stole alcohol, made it to that grocery store, stole alcohol. Before I knew it, it's 11 o'clock. Restaurants are open. I start walking bar tabs, and all of this is pinged on my GPS on my phone prior to me turning it off. And over the span of the day, prior to about 8 p.m., I had made my way from 3 different cities and circled back close to my brother-in-law's house in a total span of roughly 20 to 22 miles. So
walking, driving?
Walking. No, had no access to a vehicle. Walking, occasionally running, probably getting away. Can see the change of speed on the and I wind up at this bridge overlooking a very busy highway here in Texas. And I know exactly what I had planned to do. And my phone had been on airplane mode, and I'm staring at the oncoming traffic, trying to find the right 18-wheeler, deciding, is it going to be Peterbilt or Mack across my forehead? And I pull out my phone and I turn airplane mode off. Not sure why. I knew I wanted to just kind of record a quick message to my wife and my kids and my family. And my dad calls. And there were some messages sent and some text messages sent from loved ones, from my wife, asking where I was, what's going on, call them back, call this helpline number. They'll come pick me up wherever I am. They could tell. And I had probably said some things throughout the day alluding to taking my own life. And in that moment, my dad talked to me, not like a dad to a son, but he talked to me in a way that a coach would talk to his player. And it was, son, I'm on my way. Get to your brother-in-law's house. I'll be there in half an hour to pick you up, and we'll find a solution. We'll figure this out. And so it was a directive. It wasn't, I love you so much, don't do this. It wasn't a plead. It wasn't a father talking to a son. He spoke to me in a way that he may not have known what he was doing, but I certainly felt it, and I responded, being an athlete my whole life and being in the sports my whole life. And I listened and I went. And then that night I was committed to a mental health hospital on a 72-hour hold to sober up and detox. And during that time, in the brief phone calls that I was able to make to Amanda, my wife, and to my mother and to my dad, there was one option. And it wasn't, we're going to pay to send you to another rehab, as they did in my 20s, along the Pacific coast, where I learned more about surfing, street tacos, and yoga than I did about recovery.
Yep.
Certainly no relationship with Christ being offered at those spots. But it was to go to this place in South Dallas, a really depraved, downtrodden, underserved part of town that was 9 months long, that had a military component to it, 12-step based, but at the center of it, it was a ministry first, and it was Christ-led.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called the Men of Nehemiah, and I committed to going after my 72-hour hold. But even in the back of my mind, John, that commitment at my rock bottom, I was manipulating my own narrative in my mind that I would go, but they would eventually need me. So maybe it was 2 weeks, maybe it was 30 days, whatever, but I'm not the guy who needs it for 9 months. I'll just get a quick reset, placate my wife and family, and I'll be back to living a good life again in a month. And so that's the arc.
We'll be right back after this. Before we get to kind of the recovery aspect, I want to go back to some certain points in the story. And that, first of all, it's interesting. You said you were sent to a rehab in your 20s. So what was your drinking looking like back then that your family said, "Oh, we're going to send you to a rehab"? Like, what was that?
So, John, that was a significant amount of binge drinking, blackout drunk. I recall I wrecked my car into a neighbor's mailbox driving down my street after it was in between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. A lot of weed. And it was just one of those things coming out of that freshman year in college where I had essentially been told, commit to a probationary program or you're not allowed to participate at this university anymore, let alone be on the basketball team. So that following 9-month period or so was very dark. I lacked purpose. I lacked motivation. My parents all felt like there was a dependence on alcohol and weed in particular that needed to be addressed in a professional way. And I think maybe to make it more attractive to me, a beachside location might be more convincing.
Yeah.
And so that's what was offered. And, I didn't have any major responsibilities at the time. And I knew deep down I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled and I wasn't motivated. There were a lot of things I knew were off with me. And so I felt like in that moment, maybe this could be a good course of action to help me get right and get back on the proper track and trajectory for my life. So I went.
And what did you
didn't last long?
Yeah, okay. You kind of made that joke, like where you learn more about surfing. But what was that? Because I think we're going to juxtapose it then with what eventually worked for you. But I'm curious. Right. I'm curious about that rehab facility because I know there's I know there's people listening here who will eventually go to rehab and should go to rehab.
And there's nothing wrong with rehab.
Right. Exactly. So, but you've experienced two types of rehab. The rehab that is the
technically 5, John.
Oh, it's been 5. Oh, so
in various forms, from traditional inpatient rehab, outpatient, sober living, right?
So what was it about that one in California that you think didn't make it stick? And was it not just the rehab's fault, but yours as well?
I can't point to that place and say it was what they did that didn't work for me. It was me that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
That's abundantly clear. But in the moment, what didn't resonate with me loudly enough because of my heart posture and because of my unwillingness to admit my powerlessness to what was taking place. Because I wanted to control everything, John. I am a manipulator and a control freak at my core. And that stems from fear, right? And I was exposed and educated on the traditional 12 steps of recovery at that age when I first went to rehab. And I still practice those 12 steps today, but today they mean something entirely different, or they have rephrased. They have a much deeper meaning today than what I learned then.
Yeah.
What I
Because you
learned
see him
then
now through
was
the lens of Scripture.
I do exactly right.
Which
Exactly right.
We'll get to.
Yeah. Okay. Cart, horse. Here we go.
Yeah.
So, John, in that moment, at that age, in my early 20s, the education I was provided was the proper education, but the impact didn't come with that academic knowledge. It gave me structure. It allowed me to pursue sobriety, but I did not really submit to a higher power, as it's called in the four walls of AA. I certainly didn't attach my relationship with Jesus Christ at that time to my recovery, even though I related the two and my higher power was Christ, is Christ today. So its efficiency in my life at that time, again, were only stymied by myself. And the emphasis that program put on a near dependence on this 12-step process as an everyday, if these things are not done, then you fail. Yeah. There's an inherent failure attached to that. That, the way it was taught, and or perhaps the way I received it, more likely that in that time, didn't give me an outlook of freedom and joy. So naturally, I then continued to seek freedom and joy. And how did I find that previously? Drugs and alcohol.
Right.
So right back into it.
Right. You know, I know I know some of your stories, and, you know, feel free to tell as many as you want as I pry here. But you had said that you got drunk on air. And so, you know, I'd like to go back to that, because wait, what do you mean drunk? Were you a news guy? Like, what? I'm curious if you could just unpack that a little bit for the audience. What does being drunk on air mean? What were you doing at that time? Yeah. And how did that even work? Like, you just had a flask in your pocket, and, you know, during commercial breaks, you're throwing it back, or what happened there? So,
John, I worked at the minor league level of the NBA, the development league, now called the G League. And in that role, I was asked to coach. I was asked to facilitate and evaluate trades, salaries, player performance, analytics, all of those things. That was the title that I held. But at the level that I was at, we were asked to do many things that if we had talents for them, would you be willing, essentially, right? And one of my talents, for good or bad, was to tell a story. I was really good at telling my own, true or not. And so I could take information very quickly, analyze it, evaluate it, build a narrative behind it, and go live on television, pregame, halftime, postgame, in the middle of the game, literally leaving my bench position as a coach to go do this hit on a local network or on ESPN or on Fox Sports. So that would take place. Now, what started as I'll have a drink or two to take the edge off before a game, which, believe it or not, is rather common practice. Not to the extent
among
of which
coaches,
I did
among players, among both.
You know, I wouldn't. I don't want to put a label out there. It's just a thing that occurs sometimes among coaches or others who are in a position post-game, right? Pre-game, no, but that was my thing. I'm like, well, if it's good for post-game to be a stress relief or to bring down the energy, then why can't it do the same thing since it's pregame? So I took what I had already seen as kind of an established habit from people I admired and respected. It's acceptable, right?
Right.
And I'm like, well, if I know I've got to be on TV at, let's say, 5 minutes to tip off, and I know my coach's meeting right before the game is 20 minutes before that, where's a window of time where I can run to the hotel right across the street from the arena, just shoot right out the team locker room, one street over, hotel lobby bar, quick drink, run right back? Well, that turned into 2 quick drinks or 1 really, really big drink and run right back. And then at halftime, as the players come out, and there's normally 12 minutes or so where TV, game, coaching, responsibilities, all that would just kind of be this nebulous time frame. I knew a bartender on the concourse level of the arena. I'd go grab one at halftime. Then it got to the point where I was keeping a bottle in my bag and pouring it in a Gatorade bottle. Never taking it onto the court, never taking it with me into the arena, but sneaking off into the locker room might as well be the same thing.
Right.
And John, it got to the point where the feedback I got wasn't that the audience noticed. The feedback I got was that the people that were around me started to take notice. And then it started to progress to, hey, anything off last night? Because now all of a sudden the performance is starting to change. And it kept devolving and devolving. And then came the time, our season runs until about April, May. And in February, I'm caught walking back across from the street with an open bar tab at the hotel lobby by our team president. And he confronts me, says to go about my job, can finish the game, and we'll talk more. They present me with a pretty unique proposal at the end of the season. So fast forward, I still keep doing this, mind you, for 2 more months minimum. And at the end of the season, it's go get treatment or you don't have a job. I thought so much of myself, John, and had some other conversations already started with other teams that I wasn't in a position to go get treatment. B, I didn't think I needed it. C, I thought so much of myself that don't they know who they think I am? And then it was like, forget you, forget the 9 years, forget the fact that I grew up with you as my favorite team and you're still my favorite team. We're done. And so I tried to make it my decision when ultimately it was theirs.
And you know what fascinates me, because I'm in the same boat and, could tell similar stories, not about being drunk on air, but we all, I think, have those stories where, like, looking back, it's like, oh, it's obvious you had a problem, right? But in the moment, I'm sure you convinced yourself, you're like, I don't have a problem. Even though you're putting, vodka in Gatorade bottles or leaving your work in the middle, technically the middle of a game, right, to go drink. But I don't have a problem. And it's
right.
just such a vivid picture of how we can deceive ourselves.
It is. And John, for me, it didn't just start that way.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, I used the word earlier, devolving, right? It for me, I can look back to that first season, and I'm not saying, again, my issues stemmed way before that. They started way before that. But that first season, it started as like, oh, on a Friday night game, we'll go out as a group, coaches or staff or otherwise, and go out after the game, have a few drinks. Well, then have a few drinks turned into get drunk for Travis. And then it turned into, oh, well, on a regular work day. Now every game we do this. Every game I do this. And then a regular work day. Oh, the day's done. Happy hour. And happy hour was no longer have a snack with my wife and have a couple beers. It kept progressing and kept progressing to the point where we went from post-game drinks, post-game blackout drunk, happy hour on a regular old day, lunchtime cocktails, mid-afternoon cocktails, to, as I described at the end.
Same. Before
you can even buy the alcohol, I'm already trying to find ways to get it in.
I remember, there was one time, even just you just said that, and in my mind, I'm like, well, I guess I never did that, and I wasn't trying to justify myself, but I was like, well, interesting. It never got that bad for me, I guess.
Not yet.
But you know what I would do? And this is just to say, I would show up to my favorite beer and pizza place before they opened.
Yes.
And they would open for me and start serving me alcohol and my favorite beer at 10 in the morning. Right. So it's like, on one hand, I'm like, well, I guess I never limped to the gas station before they could technically give me beer. And I'm like, what do you mean? No, but you drove to your favorite place, and they knew that you were good for about 5 or 6 of them, so they were sure as heck going to serve you because that was a lot of great money for them. It's right. Just it's funny just how our minds work.
Well, and the level at which we can excuse the behavior.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't have a problem. This is my normal.
Yeah.
You know, I
Exactly.
recall even late in my drinking career, right? I'm working late hours. I had progressed from being in pro sports to migrating into the hospitality space as a chef. And, you know, you get off work as a chef at like 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. You go do the drink thing. But I would wake up and there was a spot similar to you, a pizza spot that they sell beer. If you go regularly, you realize they have an under-the-counter bar. You name it, they've got it under there, right? And so I would go there. They did open at 10 o'clock because as a pizza joint, you know, you start fulfilling orders and deliveries pretty quickly. I'd just post up there. And there's a taco shop that does something similarly because they sell breakfast tacos here in our area. And my excuse to that person who would see me drinking excessively, particularly at the taco shop at 7:30 in the morning, oh, I work late. This is just like someone else coming in at happy hour.
Right. Because if you get off
my
work,
day ended 4 hours ago. This is my happy hour. So don't look at me funny. This is normal.
Yeah. There's one more story that you've told me that I think is interesting, right? Because and I'm not sure exactly where it fits in the timeline, so you can kind of put it where it needs to go. But there's the story of you breaking into the locker room.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that story?
Of course. I'm an open book. Yeah.
So tell us where that story lands in, you know, because you gave us the overview before you get to, you know, what ends up becoming the final treatment center. But where does the story of breaking into the locker room fit in, and tell us that story?
Yeah, John. So that fits in pretty close to the end of my career in pro sports, right? So that the opportunities with that team that I'd been with for 9 seasons is over. I spend that summer not following up or pursuing anything really that wasn't just, I expected things to fall in my lap, and they didn't.
And this is after, like, they gave you the ultimatum and you're like, I'm leaving.
I'm not doing this.
You don't know
not
what
a
you
chance.
got. Yeah.
Yeah. And keep in mind, they had stood by me after a DWI. They had stood by me about through what likely should have been a second one, but got busted down to a public intoxication. Mm-hmm. You know, the old, you fall asleep in your car, but the keys are in the ignition.
Yeah.
And by fall asleep, I mean pass out.
Right.
So yeah, one of those. But they stood by me through that. Right. And then all this time, it was here's the ultimatum. It's this or that. And I chose that. We're done. A few months pass, and goodness, it was early fall of that same year after no longer being in their employment. I'm at the bar, and I'd come off a long work shift, and I think to myself, I wonder if my key still works, because I still have my key to the office. And I think to myself, I wonder if my security badge, my little scan, still works. It does. I invite some folks to go shoot around that happen to be with me that night. And we're drunk and we're high. And so we make our way to the arena and we go in. And again, you say break in. I say entered into a place of employment, right? Where I
my card still works.
My key works, right? And this is the delusional thinking at the time.
Right.
Well, we hang out for a split, and I run into the concession area and grab a case of beer. We're not dressed to be on the floor, so I grab some shoes and some sweats and what have you. And ultimately, I'm by myself, right? After about 30 minutes or so. And I'm there, and I'm drinking, and I'm charging my phone, and just kind of hanging out, smoking in the locker room, thinking it's funny. Like, I mean, really, really adolescent, juvenile behavior for a 35-year-old man, right? Mm-hmm. And rap at the door. And I think, oh, probably a friend of mine who was with me just recently coming back, maybe he forgot something, he's used the bathroom. It hadn't been more than 15 or 20 minutes since he left. Look out. 2 police officers, the president of the team, and a security guard. I didn't see the president of the team at the time, but he's back there. And I open the door. I'm like, can I help you? I'm like, sir, do you belong here? And I said, oh, I work here. And the voice I hear is a voice that says, you used to work here. And that's when I knew, like, oh, this is not good. This is likely to result in my arrest, which it did. I did not realize what I was doing at the time equated to a felony in the state of Texas. Between stealing the beer, stealing the gear, and having marijuana concentrate pens, I received 2 felony charges that night. And again, what does this sickness, what is this over-reliance on alcohol, this addiction do to someone? Well, for someone like me, it made me think that this was okay behavior, and that even if I got caught, people would understand and excuse it away because it's me.
Right.
So this grandiose sense of self and an upbringing where no real consequence ever stuck led me to becoming a felon in the state of Texas.
And so that is, I think, that story happens, and then you have the bridge incident, right?
Well, so no, this story happens, and then several years pass of me working in the hospitality space.
Oh,
and
goodness.
finance. Yeah. This
So
isn't even close to it.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think that's good to hear, because I think I said this. I know you probably said this. I know there's people who are listening who said this. It's like, well, if it gets really bad, I'll have an obvious wake up call, and I'll stop, right?
Right.
And the thing that I've learned with myself and with others time and time and time again is that the wake up call comes, and we hit snooze.
Snooze.
Yep. Because we're like, it really is a great analogy, because it's like, you're the night before, you're like, okay, I gotta be at work at 7. I'm gonna wake up 5:30. And the alarm goes off, and in the moment, then you're like, I don't really need to give a 5:30 snooze. I don't really. Okay, 5:45. No, I at least got a good 10. And it's it's that same mentality. We just hit snooze on the wake up calls of life.
Right.
Because there's so many things that I said I would never do, and then I'd get to them, and I'd be like, well, this ain't so bad. Snooze, snooze, snooze. Right. And so it's interesting that, like, that happens. You get charged with felonies. And then it's another 2 years before I guess you really hit rock bottom. Yeah. True brokenness.
Well, and even in that moment where I practice, as your book calls it, radical vulnerability with my pastors, it's still another 6 months from that point.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are actions that are required of someone like myself to really heal. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's one thing I really admire about your teachings in Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, John, is that you take the gospel approach, which so many people really believe can work for their loved one or for themselves, and they can, but you apply action to it. And as someone who received an education, saw it firsthand for others at my last treatment stop, of which I always say I'm a client for life, but a resident once at the Men of Nehemiah, because I can tell you, if ever I choose to drink again, A, I know it's my choice, and B, I'm aware of exactly what it is I'm doing now. And it's that awareness that I'm grateful for, and it's that same thing that you do in your writings, John, that I find so uplifting and so encouraging, because it's not a simple pray it away mentality.
Right.
Yes, we press into prayer. Yes, we lock in with the Lord, and we try to understand and gain as much discernment as we can. But we do that, and we couple it with action.
Yeah.
And I think when you marry the two, that's when you get back to the root of AA's 12-step program, right? Which is an amazing roadmap to find sobriety. But for me, that roadmap was missing the element of a gospel-centered approach as it originally was created. And that's what the Men of Nehemiah put in my life. And that's what you so eloquently put on paper in your most recent book. And that's why I find our stories not just so similar, but why I'm also so thankful that we experienced them literally within days of each other's
Yeah.
recovery date, and we've walked this walk together. It's just it's so serendipitous, and I couldn't be more grateful for it.
So let's fast forward then to the men in Nehemiah, right? So you decide, okay, I'll go to this treatment facility. It's faith-based.
Yeah, let's scale back the power of that word decide.
Yeah.
I acquiesced. I acquiesced.
Yeah. You were ultimatummed,
Yes.
or whatever. Well, actually, you know what? Before we get there is one question I want to ask you. How was this affecting your wife, and what was she saying during this time? Was she like, hey, I'm just going to let you crash and burn? Was it just a mixed bag? Like sometimes she's like, come on, stop this, or like what was the approach that she took, and how was that affecting her?
So, John, I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that's a perspective that gets forgotten.
Yeah.
In a lot of people's recovery journey, right? Because we celebrate the success of the individual's recovery or walk, in this case, mine or yours. And really, it's without the community around them and those relationships around that person, in this case, my wife and myself, I can tell you it would not have happened. Not a chance, at least not in that moment that would now lead to this moment. And so from my perspective and my very foggy memory, although I've had the good fortune of getting some quality recounting, both from her and family members and loved ones who were there, our church played a critical role in encouraging her and being there for her and for us, but really filling the gap of my irresponsibility and my destructive nature. Her parents are in recovery themselves, and they saw the writing on the wall long before this. And they weren't co-signing or enabling in any way, shape, or form. It was actually the opposite. And I think it was just this perfect blending of a very dramatic and drastic approach that had been asked of her to do for quite some time, from one element, a loving and caring and supportive perspective that was being offered in the moment as well, and then also a course of action that came about from several others. And as things continued to progressively get worse and worse, her approach to me became more stern and more demanding of action and accountability. And it was action and accountability that ultimately, as you know, from that January date to May 28th, I couldn't provide myself, or I didn't want it from others. And so that day comes, and she knew, with our two young boys at the time and my daughter, who was 10, she could not allow them to continue to be exposed to me and the dangers that I presented. She may have been able to tolerate a little bit more, but I know she was at her breaking point too.
Did she know the full depths of how bad it got? Did she know that you were driving drunk to the kids? Did she know that you were hobbling to the gas station at 7 a.m.? I
failed and lied about all of those circumstances. Despite firsthand witnesses, despite empty can evidence, all of it.
The gaslighting.
Yeah. Right. And it was, I would create any scenario where I could either drive sympathy for myself to try to excuse the behavior, or I would simply lie, become irate, and ultimately try to victim blame, and turn it around on her. Yep. And meanwhile, our finances had been in complete disarray from about my last year or two working in sports all the way through up until this point. I mean, terrible. And they wouldn't have been great, but we wouldn't have been in that desperate point where I'm selling possessions of my own just to grab cash to continue to feed my addiction. And so the original question was, what was it doing to her? Well, I can tell you, there's still effects that crop up today.
Yes.
3 years out.
Same.
Right? Because the healing isn't instantaneous, and there is no magic wand, right? But there is a process, and there is an immensely graceful God that is in our life, and one who provides safety and peace and purpose. And she was our spiritual leader, our family's spiritual leader during my sickness while I was away at treatment. And I'm just so grateful to the people that surrounded her to pull her from that sense of desperation and immense anger and disappointment and fear.
Yeah.
Because it was ultimately, I think, the fear that my kids or she may walk in one day and I wouldn't be breathing in our own home for whatever reason. Or the fear that they might get a phone call that I had harmed myself or, God forbid, someone else, stranger, loved one, or whomever. But that fear, I think, was the ultimate catalyst that got her to the point of desperation that then enabled her to take a course of action that she never envisioned for herself or for our marriage, which was, give me your wallet, or I'm taking this, get out the door, it's locked, you're not welcome here.
Mm. And there's still, you had said this, and I think it's important, is that there's still effects of that, right? There are still times where, my wife struggles with aspects of trusting me, which is totally understandable, right? Like, I remember you and I were sitting in a coffee shop one day, and I came in, and I said, "Oh man, it was kind of a rough morning." You said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, in some sock drawer that I had, my wife was digging for something, and she found an old empty bottle of the THC gummies that I used to take." And she's like, comes out of the closet crying, and she's like, "When is this from?" And I'm like, where'd you find that? I don't know what you're talking, like, what do you, she goes, "This was in the back of the sock drawer." And she's like, "When are these from?" I said, "They must be from at this point, maybe I was like a year and a half or maybe 2 years sober. I don't know." I'm like, "That's from like years ago. I don't have no idea." And she's like, "I'm choosing to trust you, but I want you to know it's really hard." And I'm like, I get it. Yeah. I don't have to like it,
Right.
But
well, so John, yours was socks. Mine was shoes.
We'll be right back after this.
One day I get a text of a picture of like the vaping devices, cartridges, THC, sent to me on my way home from work. And to say that it was a struggle to get past it would be an understatement. Because, and John, I have an issue. I have a problem. I love shoes. I have a lot of them. In fact, that's a part of how I fed my addiction, was selling some of my prized shoes in my sickness. And so I mean, probably 50 or 60 shoes just in the garage. And she had been in there cleaning and stumbled across a shoe that had a vape in it or something. And then another one and another one. And John, I thought the house had been cleared out, and I'm going to use this term not to celebrate, but the ingenuity I had of hiding my drinking was pretty stellar. Vodka in a gas can, dropping a bottle on a ski rope in the pond behind our house, hiding it in a bush. I mean, anything I could do to get away, right? Because I went full throttle in one direction. Well, this is a year plus out of treatment, and she sends this picture to me. I call immediately, and I'm like, I have no idea. I assure you, they cannot possibly be new or recent. I have not engaged in that behavior at all. I'll take any level of drug test, I'll shave my head, and you can test every little hair on it. I can assure you. And she was like, I want to believe you right now, but I think I need a little time to really pray and process this.
Yeah.
Because this is the exact behavior and the exact response you would give me back when it was true.
Yeah.
And so my challenge in that moment, John, and I remember that conversation you and I had very vividly at Black Rifle Coffee. No free ads.
Become a sponsor of the show, Black Rifle,
Become a sponsor. Yeah, we love you guys. But I remember that vividly, right? Because I asked her to consider this. I said, my behavior and my response may sound similar to the past, or my response may sound similar to the past when I was in fact using. But I said, has my behavior at any point in time in the last year, let alone the last week, day, 2, 3, whatever it may have been, since I may have been able to access and use those things that you found, has any of that given you any indication that I have broken my sobriety, that I have neglected my recovery, or that I in some way not aligned with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
I remember having that conversation with her and those exact words coming out of it. And she goes, no. And I said, so can we move forward? Will you take those things, throw them in the trash, dunk them in water if that makes you feel better so you don't believe I'll go digging through it if in fact there's still that tinge of distrust? But can you do that? And can we move forward? And she agreed.
And if you're listening to this and you are a spouse of someone who's struggled with addiction, just know that you're not crazy if you feel those things. But if you are someone who is a recovering or even inactive addiction, recovering addict or inactive addiction, just know that like it's normal for your partner to feel that way. And guess what? And I've said this a lot. Their repentance and reconciliation and all of that is not a get out of jail free card.
Right.
There are still consequences for our actions, right? And one of the consequences of our actions, mine and Travis's, is our wives still, to this day, have some trust issues. Like, and how could they not? We gaslit them for years, Like I had 2 teeth pulled in 2 weeks earlier this year. And the doctor gave me some prescription pain medicine and pills like, I know there's different schools of thought and degrees on this. Well, if you're sober, you can't have like from alcohol, and that was your thing. You shouldn't take prescription drug. Whatever. I'm just not of that, right? And it just hasn't. They've never been my thing. You know what I mean? But my wife is like, we got the prescription, and I didn't find this out until later, but she's like, I counted the pills. So I knew how many you were taking at a time, right? That you weren't going overboard. And I wasn't. Like I took 1 a day at night because after you get your teeth pulled, like you need it. Sleep is really rough because it's the end of the day. You've been talking, you've been chewing, and it's like, man, but I took the allotted amount. I followed the directions. But when she told me that, she's like, I'm kind of embarrassed. And I'm like, don't be. I get it. I absolutely get it.
John, I now wear that moment when if she's trying to provide a layer of accountability and I meet that layer, that's an achievement, man. That's a victory. And praise God, right? Because previously I would do any and everything like you would, I'm sure, to skirt that responsibility or level of accountability with excuses, lies, or some level of manipulation. Bad. Yeah. But how dare you not trust me? I'm your husband. Right? Like, I mean, just think back of all those arguments that were rooted in our abuse of alcohol and drugs. And that's the same encouragement I want to offer too, like you just said, to the spouses. You don't need to be told that you have the right to think and believe that way, even with your spouse in recovery. Mm-hmm. That is something that is built in. Realize that what I put my wife through, that's on me. Mm-hmm. I wear that mantle. Her healing and her ability to move forward is reliant upon my ability to continue to press into the Lord and to continue to do the next right thing, stay in the light, and in my case, work the steps.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
I know if I stay aligned in that way, then the healing that she needs and the trust that our relationship needs not only will be reclaimed and regained, but fully restored. And in that restoration, it's even better than it started.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I know I think I said I was just going to ask you one question, and that ended up being a lot of them, which is fine.
It's great.
Bring us back. Okay. So you reluctantly, you acquiesce, you go to Men and Nehemiah.
Yes.
Talk about the experience of going inpatient to a faith-based, gospel-centered program. What was that like, and why did it work?
So you had mentioned earlier kind of juxtaposing my treatment experiences, right? So we talked about Pacific Coast. There was inpatient, outpatient, sober living out there. There was a outpatient here in the Texas area. There were sober living home attempt as well. None that really got to the root cause, because I couldn't get there.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't vulnerable. I wasn't willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I wasn't willing to accept that I needed help in those elements of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I thought all I had was a drinking problem and a smoking weed problem.
Yeah.
Right. And that ultimately wasn't the case. And so what Nehemiah was able to do in a very comprehensive way, and I say comprehensive despite it being a 9-month program, but it's comprehensive. And I will tell you, I fully surrendered to the program, but it didn't happen immediately. We talked previously, John, about like you saying, "Oh, well, I didn't do what you did, Trav." You know, like, hey, I didn't quite. But one of my counselors, who, I mean, some of the greatest wisdom I've ever heard in my life from this man, Tommy Castillo, he goes, "Well, you didn't do it yet."
Yep.
Right. Yep. It's not, you never thought you would go from having a couple drinks after a game that you won, Travis, to getting drunk in the morning, but it took incremental steps because you never thought you'd do that. Right.
Yep.
And so for me, my willingness to buy into the Nehemiah program was incremental to start. It started with acquiescing to my parents' and my wife's demand that I go, because they weren't going to fund any other treatment center. This one was free. It was in South Dallas, and it was, Travis, figure it out or get out. Wow. Okay. I thought we loved each other. Right. So some really limited options, right?
Yeah.
True rock bottom.
Yeah.
Then it's arriving there. And John, you've spoken at our all city worship night. It's different for different reasons. And the spirit's the same. But I'll tell you, when I walked in there for the first time and I was greeted, my fear dropped just enough to wonder what this place was. And it wasn't because of what someone did or didn't do or who was in front of me or who wasn't. There is literally an anointing on this place. And I think it's because they take such diligent care and concern with remaining gospel-centered in everything that they do, which includes working the 12 steps of AA, which includes individualized counseling and therapy, which includes group therapy, which includes plugging into the community and being of service.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell yourself you can't sing, they're going to pull out the best voice you have, because you're going to learn to worship the Lord while you're there.
So
right.
True.
And so all these elements combine, right? But it's that first initial walk-in where there was and perhaps I was in a place to receive it also.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something different that pulled down the wall just enough that I would go through the intake process. The intake happens. I had told myself, no matter what, I'll do 2 weeks, maybe a month, to placate Amanda and my family. Within 3 days of being there, I meet with the director of the program, a woman named Melinda. And it turns out that I had graduated high school with her daughter and ran track with her older son at a very small private school here in Dallas. And this is a woman and her husband who come from a level of affluency that, in my mind, again, still thinking very highly of myself and where I come from, not having a real true perspective or scale of what that looks like, I knew who they were. I knew of them. I knew of their kind of status in society. And here it is. She's running a nonprofit drug rehabilitation center in the nastiest part of the town in which she lives. And this is good enough for her? Okay. Might want to reconsider who you think you are, Travis. Right? So boom, 3 days. Now that gives me like another week, because now that thought's in my head. Like, well, okay, she's running it. Something must be going on that's right, because I know her family. I know where they come from. I know what they stand for. I know what their status or their social status is in the city. Like, I hope to be someone like that one day, right? So good enough for her, by all means, it should definitely be good enough for me. And she's running it. I can trust that. So the next week progresses, and every Saturday, John, there's this thing we call Saturday morning march. And so we wear fatigues every day, military fatigues, and we march in formation wherever we go. And on Saturday morning, we happen to go for almost 3 miles in and around Cedars, South Dallas, all the way to Fair Park, in through Dolphin Heights, and back around. And for those who don't know that area, significant amount of gang activity, significant amount of prostitution, the most significant amount of concentrated drug use, primarily needles, that you'll see any part of Dallas-Fort Worth. And we are a huge city, but you can literally walk less than 15 feet, look down and see an empty baggie of fentanyl, or see a used needle or a spoon or what have you. And so we're marching, and while marching, John, I'm looking around and I'm starting to change my mind, because the love and what I felt when I walked in that door had started to wear off. That meeting with Melinda and that recognition of, well, if it's good enough for her, it's definitely good enough for me. That perspective is shifting. And I'm looking at who these 60 men I'm marching with. And some of them had come from under a bridge where they were living for several years. Most of them were heavy drug users. Only a handful of the guys that were there with me that I got to know primarily suffered with alcohol. And I'm just looking around. I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. And we're marching and we're singing cadence to Jesus, military style cadence. So imagine being on like a military base and you're hearing like, gung ho, it's off to work we go. Well, we're doing the same thing, but with like Jesus at the center of it.
Yeah.
At 6 a.m. through some nasty neighborhoods, some people who appreciate it, some people who are telling us to, shut it down. And we're going, and I'm just looking around like, no, this isn't for me. How did it get here? Like, and not how did it get here by what I did? Like, how did it get here? Like, who said this was the best idea, right? Trying to point blame at others. And we're walking down Malcolm X Boulevard. I can see Fair Park ahead. Look to my right, empty, desolate parking lot. Corner store is the only thing with functioning lights, and it's an alcohol, like beer, wine spot with bars on the windows. Around the corner from that is the Manhattan nightclub, BYOB, and there's about 6 to 8 people with their possessions right there in their shopping carts, waiting outside the liquor store. And I look at my watch. It's about 6:45 at this point. And I say to myself, well, at least it never got that. And I couldn't finish the statement, it never got that bad, because I immediately start weeping. Uncontrollably. In military fatigues, surrounded by 60 men in a bad, bad part of town, I start to weep. Because God reminded me it didn't get that bad yet. And the only reason it didn't look that bad is because I happened to be in a suburban neighborhood outside of a gas station just a mile from my home in a different style of clothing than what they had. But I had been thrown out of my house. I had no money, and I was waiting to purchase alcohol or steal it, just like those people were.
Yeah.
The commander of our platoon, Command Sergeant Major, comes marching back. Head up. You're right where you need to be. Didn't even sound like him. I'd heard him all week long barking at us during PT. Wasn't even the same voice.
Mm.
And when I asked him about it after graduation, that 9-month period, I asked him, what inspired him to come back and see me. He can't recall the moment. He goes, "You never cried." John, it was that point where not only did I realize that I was exactly where I needed to be, but it also gave me the perspective that I was just fractionally away from pushing a shopping cart in South Dallas with no family, no support, and a level of desperation that could only be healed through Christ. And Nehemiah threw that rope out of the boat, asked me to just grab it, and they started pulling me in. And so after about 10 days of being there, like I said, the first 3, then that next week, and then boom, that Saturday march, I decided I would do it for Amanda and the kids. I'm gonna do this, right? Because I can feel that it could be that bad. And that was my motivation. And that's what Tommy, my counselor, kept pushing on me. He's like, "What's your why? What's your why?" Fast forward from then to early September. Amanda's grandmother passes away. And
Amanda's your wife.
Amanda's my wife, excuse me, yes. This is a woman who helped raise her as a kid, played a significant role in her life. And I'm at church. They took us to church every Sunday. After 30 days of being there, you get the ability to leave on Sunday only, to go to a church service. And I get pulled out of the pew by someone who I'm still close to this day. And he said, "Hey, your wife's on the other phone. Before you get on the line, I want you to know her grandmother passed away." And I kind of know what that meant to her. Like, I have an understanding. I know how heavy this was. And I reverted back to some of the teachings that I had received since being there, both in individual counseling and in group counseling. And I start to use some of those tools, because all I hear on the other end of the phone is just sorrow and weeping and sadness and my kids crying in the background uncontrollably. And keep in mind, John, I don't get to talk to them. We have no phone.
Yeah.
We get a 20-minute phone call once a week after 90 days. That hasn't even happened yet. So my first verbal interaction with them via phone is after her passing. And using those tools that I was given, and then hanging up the phone, but not feeling the urging or the need to be a rescuer in presence, but knowing that what I was able to communicate was an effective tool, started to motivate me a little bit. Right, John? Because now I'm starting to see some of the things I'm learning come into practice and come into real life. And I'm like, man, I hate the circumstance, but that gave me some purpose right there. I think that's what being a husband is. I think that's what being a real father is right there. And we get back to our dorm room, and they had told me I can follow up with her after church and get a little bit more time to talk through things. And I get there, and they escort me to headquarters, and I'm walking over to headquarters. And my counselor lives about 40 minutes from the workplace. And there he is standing in the parking lot to greet me. And he hugs me, and my head falls on his shoulder, and I start crying. And he goes, I just start saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he goes, I know you're already doing exactly what you've been taught. You're going to keep doing that. And you're going to remind them of how much they love their great grandma. And the reason they're feeling that sadness and that sorrow is because they care. because they love her, because they cherish those moments. Keep pouring into them. He picks up the phone, calls. I'm able to talk to him. And John, it was that moment where I started to feel self-worth and gain self-esteem and see a purpose, because I was actually able to help my wife in a traumatic experience find a little bit of peace. In that same vein, help my kids alleviate a little bit of sorrow. And then it transformed from doing it for them to realizing God's impact on my life to that point provided me motivation to start doing it for myself.
Yeah. Man, that's incredible. And I know you end up obviously sticking with the program. You graduate, you've become a rock star, superstar down there. There's one kind of last thing I want to cover before we sign off, and that is this. And you've kind of alluded to this. You've talked about it. What does it? You and I are very aligned on our thoughts about AA, 12-step recovery, gospel-centered recovery, and whatnot. And one thing that I always try to make clear to people is when I talk about AA, when I talk about 12-step recovery, I'm not categorically against them. What I'm against is what it's become in a lot of circles, right?
Right.
Where I can't full-throatedly, if you will, support something as the best route for someone that's not pointing them to Jesus. That's
right.
what I'm called to do as a Christian, right?
Right.
Right. The kind of program worship that goes on. And so you've said something that I want to get your thoughts on, which is how do you approach the 12 steps through a gospel lens? Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? And how can others do that?
Well, so looking back at like the book of James and the book of Acts, where Bill W. was originally inspired, along with the doctor, to generate this program of recovery, which we now know as the 12 steps, you see so many gospel elements woven into those 12 steps. But to reach the masses, and at the publisher's behest, I'm sure down the line somewhere, it was we're going to say higher power. And I've had too many personal failures not involving myself intimately with Christ, and conversely, Christ intimately with me in the recovery journey, because of an over-reliance on just doing the work. Just do the work. Just do the work.
Right.
Well, for me, doing the work wasn't enough because I never found freedom. I never found joy. I never found purpose. And I can't say that's the case for everyone. I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm sharing my own strength. I'm sharing my own hope. Those words should resonate loudly with anyone who practices the AA 12 steps. Experience, strength, and hope. Mine came only when I incorporated gospel-centered recovery into my 12-step process that was given to me by the program of AA. Yeah. And in doing that, what I found out is I started seeking more purpose. I started seeking more reasons to share my testimony to others. I started seeking ways I could be of better service to others, not because I was doing it because one of the steps told me to, but because I was seeking to be more like my Lord and Savior.
Yeah.
And in doing that, all these other elements became even easier in life.
Yeah.
And now my reliance shifted from attending a meeting every day or two or three to relying on the Lord to do his work through me if I would abide in him, act on the calling he's placed on my heart, right? And through that, I found myself of service to others in a way I never experienced before, much like that moment in September, being of service to my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, I found my true calling and my purpose. And now I'm living it. And John, I've never felt more fulfilled days in my life stack one on the other, 24 after 24, than I felt in this past 18 to 24 months. Right. And that came because of a divine appointment, but it wouldn't have happened if I simply married myself to four walls and man-based literature.
Yeah. And media. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
You know, it just didn't, it never resonated with me before, and it certainly wouldn't have worked this time around. What worked was what Nehemiah inspired me to do, which was pursue a deeper relationship with my Lord and Savior, humble myself, learn to serve, be vulnerable, and enter into fellowship with the Lord through worship. Something that I never really took seriously. I was one of those guys at church, John. I know you can relate. Not that I'm saying you were one. I bet you can sing. But I was one of the guys who, you know, I pretended to be a drummer at church. I'd stand up. You wouldn't hear me say a word, but I would do the pitter patter on the chair in front of me, you know, and that was my contribution to the worship at that time at church service. Right. Yeah. And so, you know, that was me getting into the Lord, baby. Right. Well, now, I mean, I'm heard front row, back row, side wall, back wall, wherever. Like, I will not sing. I worship, but I cannot say I sing, right? And it was that softening of my heart that I think really allowed me to understand what God was doing in me and submit myself more fully to Him. Yeah. And it's that same approach, I think, that gospel-centered recovery can provide someone, because when you aim to achieve recovery through the lens of being in Christ's light first, the sobriety, the mental healing, the anxiety, depression, all of that becomes minimized because it seems like something can be achievable. Small victories can be had each step along the way, because ultimately we're serving our Lord and Savior first. We're doing what He's asking us to do first. And in kind of in a really cool way, these other things just happen.
Seek first,
not without action, but they just happen.
Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Right? You just gotta love when the Bible is true. Travis, man, thank you so much. Thanks for your openness, your honesty, your vulnerability. By the time this airs, I'm pretty sure we'll have people will have known you a little bit better because of your involvement in Veritas Recovery as one of our founding board members. And so I just thank you for your willingness, your energy, your passion for gospel-centered recovery. And, you know, I never would have imagined 3 years ago that I'd meet someone like you that then not only becomes a friend, but becomes a fellow co-laborer in this work. And I just couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else. So thank you so much. Love you, brother. And we'll, like I said, people will be seeing a lot more of you in several platforms that I am a part of. So thank you.
God willing, I love you, brother. Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you to the Veritas community at large for allowing me to share. So praise God.
You know, I forget that when Travis tells that story about being on the bridge, that is May 27th. And, you know, it's a significant day for me as well, that we basically, Travis and I share that rock bottom moment date. And I have that tattooed. If you're watching on the veritasdaily.com, you'll see I'm holding up my arm. I have May 27th, 2023 tattooed on my arm. So it's not even just the actual date, it's the year as well. And so it's just so cool to me that God was, in a sense, weaving our stories together in ways and long before we even knew it. And so I just, man, Travis is someone that I am so honored to do ministry with. And our stories are so very similar and yet different, right? And maybe you're listening to this and you found that your story is similar. And I just want to encourage you that there's a place for you, that you can open up, that telling your story does not disqualify you, and that there are people waiting to hear it. And so I talked about Veritas Recovery in the beginning, and you can go to veritasrecovery.org. We have a Sunday night meeting that we host, and I would love to see you on there. It's open to anyone, and it's the opportunity for you to be radically vulnerable, to meet people like you. And yet, if you heard Travis's story and you're like, this is very different, I would say that's okay as well, right? Don't get lost or caught up in the comparison trap. As you heard, like that I think is one of the devil's greatest tools. Well, I'm not that bad. I'm not doing that, right? And, Travis talked about that. He's sitting there, and he's has that moment where he's like, well, at least I'm not. And then he stops himself and realizes I'm doing the thing that I said, at least I'm not. I'm doing the thing I never said I'd do. I'm the person I thought I'd never become. And I can't tell you when I became that person. It's a slow fade, like I say in my book, but yet it was there. And so, listen, my hope is that you don't have a story like this. My hope is that you're listening to this and you're realizing, you know what? I'm being convicted to address my drinking, and perhaps I can catch it before it gets to the point of Travis, before it gets to the point of John. And I would say you are just as welcome. You are just as welcome in our community. So with that said, please visit Life Audio. You can go to lifeaudio.com and listen to other great podcasts. My friend Christy Osborne in Love Life Sober, she just recently had John Ortberg on, which I think we're going to be working to get him on this podcast as well. And then if you want to pick up my book, Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, you can go to christianalcoholic.com as well. And it is still 30% off through the publisher. So you can pick that up. Love you all. We'll see you back here again next week.